They were supposed to be primitive. That was my first mistake. I had cataloged over 47 emergent civilizations across a spiral arm, dissecting their development, projecting their futures. Most plateau after the invention of atomic energy. Some destroy themselves. Others stagnate. But none behave like the humans. I arrived in orbit under orders from the Atari Scientific Assembly. Initial scans were routine, rotational satellites, decaying radio signals, ecological instability, and a chaotic pattern of technological distribution. Their world was fractured, nations bristling with weapons while simultaneously exchanging art and data. They launched telescopes into the void while still arguing over water rights. They explored their planetary neighbors while some among them still died of preventable disease. Their contradictions were endless. That was the second mistake. I tried to fit them into patterns. I intercepted their broadcasts, movies, speeches, public debates, private confessions. One moment I'd be watching a global sports competition with every species represented on their planet cheering in unity, and the next, a bloodied trench from a war just 2 generations past. Their history was carved in conflict, yet their present was saturated with efforts to connect, to understand, to reach beyond. They wept easily, laughed harder, and bled far too often. The simulation said they were 20 years from developing a primitive interstellar drive, but they'd already launched crewed missions far beyond the margin for what was expected at their energy level. It wasn't just the technology, it was the urgency behind it. They weren't expanding for glory or conquest. They were doing it because they feared being left behind. Their skies were filled with junk, failed rockets, derelict stations, abandoned dreams. But below that mess was a species that refused to stop trying. Where other civilizations tread carefully into space, humans lunged at it with reckless defiance. They didn't trust peace. That unsettled me. I watched their conflict simulations, games, they called them. Children practiced war strategies by the age of 6. Teenagers simulated planetary assaults as sport. Entire cultures idolized generals and warriors not because they brought death, but because they endured it. What disturbed me most was how they told their own stories. Every human hero suffered. Victory always came at a cost. They were obsessed with sacrifice, as if pain was not to be avoided but embraced, even revered. I'd seen countless worlds build legends, but none that wove suffering into their mythos like the humans did. At first, I assumed this was a relic of their past, a leftover brutality they hadn't yet shed. But then I watched their emergency response networks, their disaster protocols, their planetary coordination drills. Entire nations would mobilize within hours for a hurricane, an earthquake, a missing child. Strangers rushed toward danger without orders. There was no algorithm for this. Most sapient species survived by logic and self-preservation. But humans, they ran toward burning buildings. They donated organs to people they'd never met. They sent their last ships not to escape, but to shield others. I saw a mining vessel deter 20 light minutes off course because they picked up a faint distress signal, and I watched them break themselves saving lives. And still they fought. Each other. Themselves. Nature. Everything. Their environmental collapse wasn't passive. It was war. They weren't adapting to it. They were declaring battle on it. Giant machines dragged carbon from the air. Billion-dollar projects were launched to push back rising tides. Even when the fight was against their own mistakes, they charged into it like it was a rival army. And yet they smiled. They wrote poetry. They built music into machines. They sang in zero gravity. I once listened to a maintenance worker singing to herself while repairing a malfunctioning satellite. She didn't know I was listening. It wasn't meant for anyone. Just a human, humming while dancing on the edge of space, completely alone. They weren't prepared for war. They lived in it. When the Sol system registered a military maneuver near its outer boundary, they didn't panic. They activated. I tracked the data. Within 37 minutes of detecting an unknown vessel, 7 orbital defense platforms powered up, 5 deep space monitoring drones altered their patrol vectors, and 2 squadrons of stealth craft vanished from known scans. They didn't even announce it. No broadcast. No demand. Just action. That's when I started to worry. I'd seen militarized cultures before. The Abelians trained their entire population from birth. The Varnic consumed weaker species without emotion. But humans weren't like that. Their violence wasn't reflex. It was chosen, and they chose it when threatened. One day, I listened in on a small gathering of human military strategists discussing historical battles. One asked, "What's the most effective tactic?" A woman replied, "Whatever gets us home." They all nodded. Not triumph, not conquest, just survival. I reviewed 100 conflicts across their history. Every time they were cornered, they adapted new weapons, new tactics, new rules. When technology failed, they turned to guerrilla warfare. When outgunned, they turned to ideology. When isolated, they built alliances. No matter what, they found a way, not always honorably, but always effectively. And they never, ever forgot. One file caught my attention. A tiny nation defeated by a superpower in the 20th century. Decades later, that same nation launched satellites. Their descendants stood shoulder to shoulder with former enemies, piloting ships side by side. Humanity didn't just remember pain. They metabolized it. That was when I realized something terrifying. Humanity had no singular enemy. They fought chaos, injustice, nature, themselves. And if someone became the next threat, they would fight that too. And they would learn from it, integrate it, weaponize the memory. I was no longer studying them. I was witnessing them. And what I saw wasn't a violent species. It was a species born in fire and teaching itself to aim. The Dranthal Dominion made their first mistake when they attacked a civilian science outpost near Saturn's orbit. They didn't know it was human. It had no flags, no weapons, no military presence. Just a cluster of modular habitats running deep space observation experiments. To the Dominion, it was a piece of drifting salvage on the edge of claimed space. They destroyed it to send a message. They didn't expect a reply. Within an hour, Earth's deep alert systems lit up. No diplomatic cables. No public statements. Just motion. Vera watched the initial transmission logs with quiet horror. A single encrypted burst left Earth's orbital defense network. Then, across every major lunar and orbital relay station, ships began rerouting themselves without verbal orders. Mining rigs abandoned their payloads. Civilian transports altered course mid-flight. 2 long-haul colonization ships turned around, jettisoned their cargo, and reconfigured for deep space combat support. Humanity didn't mobilize. They transformed. The first vessel to reach the attack site was a Sparrowblade, an old rescue-class cutter retrofitted with hardened hull plating and radiation shielding. Not a warship, just a ship that refused to stop flying. The Sparrowblade emerged from a slingshot maneuver around Titan and dove into the debris field, maneuvering through radiation and wreckage to recover survivors. It didn't leave when the second Dominion vessel arrived. It deployed decoys, flared its engines, and fired a burst of encrypted noise into the local system. Moments later, 3 more human vessels dropped in, light freighters, patched together with jury-rigged plasma coils, and rail cannons built from repurposed mining drills. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't ask for terms. They engaged. The Dranthal didn't understand. Their doctrine assumed numerical superiority won battles. They saw no fleets, no capital-class ships, no planetary bombardment, just old vessels charging at them with unpredictable trajectories and erratic patterns. Ships flew into each other's blind spots. Engines flared at odd intervals. And when one ship was crippled, its wreck was used as cover for the next wave. It wasn't war. It was controlled madness. Viral had studied thousands of battle formations from across the galaxy. None resembled what the humans did. They didn't hold lines. They didn't reinforce ranks. They created chaos, then moved through like predators who trained in the dark. She watched as one small vessel, the Halberd's Cry, took 5 hits to its side but kept moving. Instead of retreating, it slammed itself into the Dominion ship's lower hull, pierced it, and deployed boarding units. The ship never came back out, but the Dominion vessel lost power shortly after. No declarations, no flags, just consequences. The Dranthal lost their initial strike team in less than 22 minutes. Viral access restricted Atari networks to get a broader picture. The data was fragmented, but the message was clear. Earth had triggered a contingency state. Their outer defense network activated failsafes, not seen in centuries. Deep under the ice of Europa, a dormant AI war node spun up. From Venus orbit, an old decommissioned railgun lifted itself in the atmosphere, targeting anything larger than a cruiser within 100 million kilometers. And then Earth went quiet. No public messages. No response to council inquiries. Just one signal. An old Earth symbol for asterisk. Do not enter. Asterisk. The Dranthal escalated. They couldn't understand the silence. They believed humans were buying time. So they deployed a real fleet. A fleet of over 50 capital-class vessels, designed for planetary subjugation and orbital domination. They entered the outer Sol system, expecting resistance. What they found was a graveyard. Human ships didn't meet them in formation. They struck from asteroid fields, from the shadows of moons, from radiation belts. They used the sun's flare cycles to blind enemy sensors. They detonated fusion cores as mines. They disabled drives, not to cripple the enemy, but to strand them, make them float helpless, watching. The Dranthal's command vessel was hit from below, pierced by a missile launched from a repurposed mining pod that had been drifting cold for 2 weeks, its pilot in cryo-sleep, waiting. Viral's own species sent a ship to monitor the situation. It was warned off by a single human transmission. This is not your war. Do not make it one. No threats. No bravado. Just inevitability. The Dranthal attempted surrender. Humanity never replied. They didn't need to. By the 3rd week, only 6 Dominion ships remained. 5 were adrift. 1 escaped, but barely. Viral watched all this unfold and realized she had made her 3rd and final mistake. Assuming humanity would follow the same rules everyone else did, because when the battles ended, Earth didn't hold parades. They didn't broadcast victory speeches. They didn't colonize or reclaim territory. Instead, they sent a packet. A single encrypted message was delivered to every major species diplomatic channel. When decoded, it contained nothing but a list. Names, thousands of them. Scientists, engineers, medics, children, all killed in the first unprovoked strike. No commentary, no demands, just a record. Below it was a single sentence. We remember everything. Viral stared at that phrase for hours. Not we forgive. Not we retaliate. Not even justice. Just memory. Cold. Permanent. The Atari Council convened a private meeting. Viral was summoned to explain the nature of the human response. She told them the truth. They don't escalate, she said. They answer. And once the answer begins, it doesn't stop until the question is erased. One counselor scoffed. They still lack century unity. Surely this was a coalition of rogue elements. Viral responded quietly, "No, this is their unity. You just witnessed it." And she realized something she hadn't said aloud, something that made her stomach churn. Humanity hadn't mobilized for war. They'd simply stopped pretending they weren't already in one. The Dranthal thought they'd won a small victory when they captured a human soldier, one survivor from a disabled boarding ship. Pulled from the wreckage in a vacuum-sealed suit, half his organs bruised from rapid decompression. They shackled him, restrained him, dosed him with pain inhibitors, and sent the footage to their command as proof that humans could break. They didn't know his name, didn't think it mattered. But Viral learned it quickly. Captain Miles Wren. Not a commander, not special forces, just a ship officer, assigned to engineering oversight, not combat. But they'd caught him alive, and that alone made him dangerous. At first, they used drugs, standard neural softeners designed to induce compliance. He laughed. Then they tried memory loops, forcing him to relive moments of physical trauma pulled from his cortical scans. He clenched his teeth and smiled. The Dominion interrogators escalated. Sensory deprivation, psychological distortion fields, even psychic brute forcing via synthetic empaths. That's when things began to turn. Wren didn't just resist. He talked, not about tactics or locations or access codes. He told them stories. History, his own, humanity's collective nightmares. "You think this is new to us?" he whispered, staring straight into the interrogation drone's lens. You think this is pain? We invented religions around pain. We wrote poetry with it. We buried entire continents beneath it. This is just a Tuesday. He spoke about Earth's darkest eras, genocides, global wars, colonizations, civil collapses. He didn't flinch. He listed every mistake, every atrocity, every self-inflicted scar his species had ever recorded. Not with shame, with ownership. You want to understand us, he said. Start with the worst thing we've ever done. Then realize we got up the next day and kept going. The Dominion handlers were unnerved. This wasn't defiance. It was something else, something older, a kind of resilience that didn't need weapons or orders, just memory, just will. They tried to break that will by threatening the systems he came from. They displayed holograms of human colonies, asked him how many he was willing to lose before speaking. Ren leaned forward in his restraints, calm, unblinking. You want to know how we survive? He asked. Because we already lost everything once. Every person in our history crawled out of the grave of someone else's disaster. If you burn one colony, 10 more will be named after it. If you kill 1,000 of us, 1,000,000 will study the footage. His voice turned cold. We don't fear death. We document it. Vera watched every broadcast, studied every word. She felt something deep in her chest that the Atari rarely experienced. Dread. Because Ren wasn't indoctrinated. He hadn't been programmed. No human told him what to say. What she saw wasn't strategy. It was instinct. And then, 2 weeks in, he escaped. No weapons. No outside help. Just the observation that one of his guards used the same neural relay protocol as a civilian interface. He triggered an overload, collapsed the cell walls field, and set the entire prison floor into lockdown chaos. The riot that followed was a mixture of prisoners, guards, and Dominion staff all turning on one another because he didn't escape alone. He freed everyone. The Dominion command ship was forced to isolate the entire block and vent the corridor into space. Ren was already gone. For 5 days, he vanished from all internal scans. The Dominion assumed he died in the riot or was ejected into the void. Vero suspected otherwise. She was right. On the 6th day, Dominion communications began failing. Not across the fleet, just within the command vessels. Secure channels scrambled. Orders delayed. Weapon systems running in diagnostic loops. They found a virus. Human-made. Built on legacy code scavenged from pre-space Terran computers. Obsolete in theory. Utterly devastating in execution. It had been implanted via an internal console on the prison deck. Captain Miles Wren had disabled the entire Dominion BattleNet with a code patch written in a 30-year-old programming language. By the time the Dominion fleet realized, the humans were already moving in. Vero tracked the reinforcements as they slid through the system, dark and silent, not broadcasting victory, not demanding surrender, just approaching. Wren was recovered 6 days later. A maintenance drone picked up his beacon from a discarded escape pod drifting among shipwreckage. He was dehydrated, wounded, sleep-deprived, and still smiling. He handed over a data cube. Full Dominion fleet telemetry, internal communications, troop deployments, tactical doctrine. When Earth's commanders asked how he'd acquired it, he said, I asked. No medals, no parade. He returned to duty the following week. Vero's final entry on his file read, Miles Wren is not an outlier. He is not a legend. He is proof. Proof that humanity doesn't train its deadliest agents. They create them every time someone threatens what they care about. Her report to the Atari High Assembly contained a warning. They do not survive because they are immune to suffering. They survive because they carry it, weaponize it, live inside it. One human can collapse your fleet, but a hurt human, that's how civilizations end. And worse still, they never celebrate it. Because to them, survival isn't victory. It's the minimum acceptable outcome. They sat in silence as she entered the chamber. 12 species represented the Galactic Council. They had convened emergency sessions before, for planetary collapses, for rogue AI outbreaks, for pandemics that threatened entire systems. But never for a single species. Never for one like this. Viral stood before them, hollow-eyed and still wearing the data rig that hadn't left her body since the first human warship moved. She looked like a ghost dragged through time and telemetry. No one interrupted her. They all wanted to hear, and none wanted to believe. Her voice was calm. I was assigned to observe them. I filed my first reports with optimism. I thought they were chaotic, but promising, capable of change. I believed they were simply young. She looked up. I was wrong. A Murin diplomat twitched its antennae. Are you saying they're hostile? Viral didn't blink. No, I'm saying they're inevitable. She projected the footage. Silent, cold imagery. Dominion vessels turned into drifting coffins. Human rescue ships towing survivors while scanning for cloaked threats. Memorials built into orbital scaffolding. Names etched onto the hulls of civilian vessels. No flag, no anthem, just memory, asterisk, asterisk. Another counselor leaned forward. They've made no formal demands. They don't need to, Viral said. They didn't dismantle the Dominion to conquer them. They did it to close the loop. They view war like infection. When something threatens a system, they remove it entirely. She switched the display to Earth, the homeworld. Recovered footage, public broadcasts, intercepted internal networks. What do they want? Someone asked. Viral hesitated. To be left alone. To not be attacked. To be remembered for what happens when they're not. The council chamber darkened. A new signal had arrived. A video file. No encryption. No voice. Just a slow pan across a silent hangar on Mars. Inside were children, not soldiers. Learning. Simulating. Practicing orbital insertions and emergency evac drills. No play. No celebration. Just quiet discipline. A species teaching its young that peace was a pause, not a promise. The next clip showed a city rebuilding after a coastal flood. No speeches. No declarations of resilience. Just movement. Humans filling sandbags, clearing debris, already planning for the next one. Because to them, suffering wasn't failure. It was expected. Why do they live like this? A counselor asked. Why assume pain? Viral replied, because they've always had it, and they've never once believed the universe owed them peace. They survive anyway. She paused the feed on a final image. A fleet of Sentinel-class ships parked just outside known territories. Unarmed, unflagged, unmoving. Silent warships with black hulls and a single glowing line down their center. A mark the humans didn't explain. They didn't patrol. They didn't orbit. They simply existed. Watching. Waiting. They haven't claimed new territory, someone muttered. No, Viral confirmed. They don't expand. They prepare. A faint murmur passed through the room. Prepare for what? Viral's eyes were empty when she answered. Everything. Then she delivered her final report. Earth had created contingency plans not just for defense, but for galactic threats no one else had even conceived. Rogue civilizations. Weaponized extinction events. Species-level AI collapses. Interdimensional incursions. Black box protocols. Active and funded. Every one of them labeled under a single category. If it ever happens again. The humans weren't reacting to the Dominion's aggression. They were reacting to the possibility that it could happen again. And worse, they didn't seem angry anymore. They didn't seem afraid. They just endured, silently, together, forever in motion. A new message appeared on the main console. Origin unknown. Routing. Non-galactic standard encryption. Content. 8 words. The message read, "We do not seek war, but we remember." Viral turned away from the council. "I watched them fight," she said. "Not for territory, not for vengeance, but because someone reminded them what it felt like to be broken. And they decided never again. For anyone." She took a breath. "They are not monsters. They are not saviors. They are humans, and I fear them all, because they fight like grief learned how to march." No one spoke, because in that moment, every species in the room finally understood. The most terrifying thing in the galaxy wasn't a weapon or a fleet or an empire. It was a species that survived everything and chose to remember it.